Parents who have disowned or genuinely stopped loving your child. What happened? I'm not a parent. I've never disowned a child. My parents disowned my oldest sister. I'm the youngest of 3 girls. My oldest sister had a horrible relationship with my father, blames me for getting in the way of their relationship. She had her first baby, to spite him, when she was 16 years old. My father refused to give her money because she met a deadbeat child predator and got pregnant again, then again, and again. She constantly put herself and deadbeat before kids. Dad would send money to girls for Christmas and birthdays and never heard a thing. He finally gave up. She's 30, has 6 daughters, and lives in a mobile home in North Carolina. We hadn't seen or heard from my sister until June of this year. My oldest niece contacted me asking to come to Florida, where I live, for the summer to get her and her sisters out of the trailer. I agree, contact sister and she agrees. I set up plane tickets and organize the rooms they'll stay in. When they got here, they were completely disheveled. Clothes visibly dirty, smelled foul, so covered in lice that my white towel stained grey from removing them. My niece informed me that they had been without water and electricity for 6 months. They live in a 2-bedroom mobile home. There are holes in the roof, bugs, and rats everywhere. As a family, we decide the girls aren't going back to North Carolina. We tell my sister to come to my parents' house in Florida to get a life together and get back on her feet. She refused because deadbeat is not invited. Ironically, she found out that deadbeat is cheating on her. She confronts him and he kicks her out of trash trailer. Deadbeat said, I would rather be homeless than live with you. Sister now works for the dollar store and doesn't pull her weight with kids. At least the girls are safe now. I never really finished my point with the story. My parents had disowned my oldest sister when she moved to North Carolina with deadbeat for 6 years, until my niece reached out to me through Facebook. I had never even met my 2 youngest nieces until this event. I regret turning my back on my sister. I really hate her and what she put her babies through, but if we stayed in her life for those 6 years we maybe could have prevented this. Not me, but my great-grandma. This story is really sad but also interesting, so I thought I'd share it. She was a young Creole teenager. French Creole was her first language, and she was a quarter to half black like me, with tan skin and loose brown curls. She was born in Florida, but when things started getting worse for black people in Florida, her family relocated to Texas. For those who don't know, Creole people tend to play heavily into colorism. Although they are definitely mixed race, they prioritize light-skinned people. The looser your curl, the lighter your skin, the more white you look, the better. Her parents had high expectations for her to marry a wealthy, light-skinned man who would take care of her. Instead, she met my great-grandfather, a poor, dark-skinned man jumping from job to job working for farmers and trying to make a living. The 2 of them fell in love. They were just teenagers. Her parents threatened to disown her if she continued seeing him, and like a rebellious teenager, she refused. They wanted her to do better. She wanted to be in love. They might have broken up eventually if she didn't get pregnant. But she did, and that was the end of it. Her parents basically said, "You've ruined your life," and disowned her right there. The whole family disowned her. No one would speak to her. Aunts, uncles, cousins, not a single person stood up for her. So she had no choice. The 2 of them moved to California so he could get a job picking oranges. He built a house. They had their first daughter. She was 16. She never saw her family again. My parents disowned my oldest sister. She always struggled growing up more than us. She became a teen mom with a bad older dude, partied a lot, etc. But my parents helped her a lot. They do okay for themselves, but had a no co-signing rule for all 6 of my siblings and I. Still, they co-signed for her house, so she could get a head start. She didn't pay the mortgage for almost 3 years before my mom got served in front of all the other nurses at her work. My parents worked tirelessly to try to work out deals where my sister and her family kept the house and got some leniency, but to no avail because my sister never showed up for court dates. During this time, she paid $12,000 for IVF and got pregnant with her 5th kid. When my mom demanded some of the money back, she accused my dad and my brother of beating her sons. When my parents took them to Disney World, he didn't, and said she'd file a police report if he asked for money again. They kept asking, cause it wasn't true. She awkwardly joined us for Christmas and punched my brother in the face during the meal for humiliating her oldest son by asking him if he wanted to work at my brother's company for good pay. Her oldest son is in and out of jail, and my brother was trying to help him after his release, but her son said he didn't want a job and got mad. She then called the cops and told them the same brother had illegal guns in his truck, and they came on Christmas night and searched his truck. No guns found. Needless to say, she is not welcome anywhere near any of us, and my mom still cries about it, but refuses to talk to her again. My mother and her sister were both adopted into a great family. Recently, my grandfather fell ill, and we were told to prepare to say goodbye, so the family gathered. My grandmother has had a hard time with her memory since she had a brain hemorrhage, but she welcomed my aunt into her home during this tough time. Whilst my grandfather was in his final week, Wendy, aunt, took my grandmother's ATM card and proceeded to spend well over $1,000 on herself and get herself a motel room. She also attempted to steal their car. When my uncles found out, she basically disappeared into the wind. After my grandfather passed and his funeral was all sorted, my grandmother went to an attorney to write Wendy out of any inheritance she would get from their estate when she passes. She didn't press any formal charges because the whole process would have been lengthy and more painful for her. She didn't need the extra stress. I'm pretty sure one of my uncles also threatened Wendy to make sure she stayed away from my grandmother from now on too. She started stealing from us as a kid, then it moved up to forged checks, stole her sister's Christmas gifts. Then there were the multiple arrests, conversion, theft, assault, drugs. The final straw was when she dumped her kid and left town to fool with a married man for several years. Kid is 11. He has had a long haul. Everything she say is just a bunch of lies and more lies. And yes, she has had counseling numerous times. It hurts, but it is more peaceful. Did I mention the identity theft? Christ, that took a real long time to fix. My siblings and I have stopped interacting with my oldest brother. We found out that years earlier he had molested at least 2 boys. He was an adult at the time. He showed no remorse and turned the story around to say that those boys were at fault. It was so disgusting to watch someone you grew up with treat people so poorly and show such a blatant disregard for others. The good news is that the remaining 4 siblings have become closer, and we now are able to appreciate the good we see in each other. It's true when they say that if you could pick your family it would look much different than it is. My father said my mother's issue was she had too many children, and it gave her some kind of brain fever, much like a dog that loses its mind after having too many puppies. My mother said my father felt trapped by me. He was planning to leave when it was just my 2 older brothers, and then my mother got pregnant with me and he felt obligated to stay. Now that I'm an adult with 2 kids myself, I think I realized that both of my parents are just extremely mentally ill and incapable of loving anyone, including themselves. My family disowned me because I disowned my mother. I was sexually groomed and abused/tortured by her husband for years, and when I finally told her, she not only didn't believe me, but stayed married to him for 7 years. I had to move out at 16 to get away from how I was being treated. Then when I finally began speaking to others, she started to cover her ass with her social circle by telling them that I seduced her husband. I cut her off for years and didn't ever want to see her again, but my family bullied me to just get over it and have a relationship with my mother, and that I was hurting her. Even my sister, who knew what happened, knew I stayed for so long to protect her, fell into a trap of my mother whining to everyone around her and painting me as a liar. About 4 years ago she was very suddenly diagnosed with advanced cancer and didn't have much time. I was moving out of my home state and everyone told me I needed to see her before I left, that I needed to be there, but I didn't want to. In the end everyone turned their back on me. They were so mad I wouldn't just forget my trauma just to say goodbye to someone I hadn't loved for a long time, and rightly so. The topic seems to have widened a bit, a family torn apart. based on an aunt and her niece. Aunt starts signs of dementia at a relatively young age, is moved into an assisted living home. Niece, who bounces around jobs, gets hired to go visit her about once a week, take her out to the mall or a walk in the park, whatever. Paid handsomely. We get an alert that aunt has a check bounce from her account that should have $5,000 in it. Niece has drained the account. Proven beyond a doubt, with receipts. Niece would take aunt to aunt's bank machine every Friday and withdraw $200, then fill her car with gas aunt can't drive, and charge us hours when she clearly didn't spend hours with aunt. Charged us claiming she took aunt to appointments. There was no appointment. We can actually call the doctor. The family rift. For some bizarre reason niece's family took her side. My ex-wife disowned my son. We both married young, when I was in the military, high school sweethearts. She became pregnant 6 months into our marriage. I don't think she connected with him at all after he was born. The most she did with him was Instagram photo shoots where she painted herself as #1 mommy. When he turned 3, I left the military. A year after that, she ran for the hills. I remember it like it was yesterday. I sat down with her at a local restaurant to talk divorce plans. We split all of our financials and material items down the middle. We finally got to custody for my kiddo, something I dreaded to discuss because fathers never gain custody in my area, and she tells me, I want absolutely no responsibility. I was taken back, and I asked if she was sure. She was. That one sentence hurt me more than anything else that happened during that time. My biological father wanted nothing to do with me, and now I was seeing it happen with my own child, but with his mother. I received full custody and she married within a year afterwards. She had another child too. Her parents try their best to be a part of his life, but she still does her best to avoid him. He's 7 now, and used to it, but I know it weighs heavily on him. Shit sucks ass, but it's life I guess. That's it for today. Do all the YouTube stuff and I'll see you tomorrow.